Truck stops aren't just about convenience, they're supply chain lifelines, according to a new study.
Plus, the dog days of summer are making their mark on the spot market, and more on a brand new edition of Trucking with OIDA. Welcome to the show. I'm Ashley Blackford.
I'm Scott Thompson. Welcome back, Ashley. We missed you last week.
Yeah, I say I missed you too, but
no, you didn't. It's okay.
I enjoyed my time away.
You were camping.
Camping, yes. Good time.
In
Went
the
to,
Ozarks.
The Ozarks. Went to Branson, Missouri. Yeah.
It's pretty down there.
It is very pretty, yeah. And it was a little hot the first few days, cool the last.
Yeah, it's cooled off a lot here this week.
Yeah, it almost feels like fall.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be 143 degrees next week.
Nice to take a little break, though.
They say that if you don't like the weather in the Midwest,
wait like a half
just
an hour.
wait an hour.
You know, I think they actually say that everywhere.
Do they?
I think so, yeah.
Well, it's not true in places. I grew up in Los Angeles. It's not true in Los Angeles. Where
I've heard it on the East Coast, though.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. Well, I think in the Midwest, I think we can really lay.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I think it's really true here.
I agree.
I don't know. Anyway, we've got a good one for you today. We're going to talk truck stops a little bit later. Actually, Tyson Fisher of Laneline Magazine helped us out with that interview with a couple MIT researchers who looked into truck parking infrastructure and just how important it is, not just a convenience, obviously, for filling up and, getting snacks and food. It's also important in emergencies as well. And we'll check in with our friend Brent Hutto of truckstop.com a little bit later in the show to take a look at the spot market and what it's doing out there. Before all that, though, let's talk some news of the day here. We've got quite a bit to cover, Ashley.
Yeah.
We're holding it all for you until you came back.
Thank you.
You're welcome, most welcome. We're going to begin with what seems like kind of a regular occurrence of late. We've got ELDs being pulled from the list of registered devices. Two, in fact, FMCSA adding two more to that list. We're talking about the Walker ELD and the SR ELD, both for failing to meet the minimum requirements. In this case, FMCSA says that neither device has a printer, and if an ELD doesn't have a printer, the display must be visible for officers without them having to enter the cab. So if you've got either of these ELDs, the Walker ELD or the SR ELD, you've got until September 29th to replace it with a compliant device. In the meantime, you're being asked, as is often the case with all of these situations, to revert to paper logs or logging software to record hours of service. And if you're keeping track, so far this year, FMCSA has added 16 ELDs to its revoked list, and none have been reinstated on that list. So again, one of these stories that continues to happen. I think there's more than 1,000 ELDs that are actually compliant on the list. So you can go to the FMCSA website to check those out.
All right. After 2 months of losses, truck driver jobs saw a boost in the month of July. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reveals nearly 4,000 truck driver jobs were added last month. But before we get too excited, some experts predict more job losses could be ahead as tariffs and trade policy may disrupt freight demand.
Keeping an eye on that for sure. Also keeping an eye on Capitol Hill in the nomination of Derek Bars to lead the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. We've talked about this quite a bit in the past few weeks here. After that nomination hearing, looks like Mr. Bars will have to wait a bit longer, though, for confirmation. The Senate left town over the weekend without looking at a number of Trump administration nominees, a list that includes Bars, of course, and nominees for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration as well. And what this means for Bars and others here is that it's not going to be taken up by the full Senate for a vote until after the Labor Day holiday, which I believe is September 1st this year. We've talked about this. Bars is almost certainly going to be confirmed by the Senate there. He's just going to have to wait a little bit longer before that process plays out.
Yeah. This one, I don't know if it's good news, bad news. Rhode Island.
I'll be the judge of that.
All right, we'll see.
Maybe not. I don't know.
Rhode Island had truck-only tolls. I guess it started back in 2018, a way to generate revenue to fund bridge and infrastructure repairs across the state. However, in 2022, it was ruled unconstitutional. The state appealed the ruling, and a federal court sided with Rhode Island. So in the governor's 2025-2026 budget, it stated that roughly $10 million would come from the truck tolls. However, they haven't started back up yet. So at an event recently, the governor said they'll come out with an announcement when the technology is in place for the tolls to start back up. But he said they're several months away from that. So I don't know if that's good, bad.
somewhere in the middle.
somewhere in the middle,
Yeah.
I
Well, I guess
guess,
it's good for a few months until they
until they
start
start
back
them
up.
back up again.
I think this is one of these situations that is always under legal,
Mm,
crosshairs, with lawsuits and everything as well. So for now, I guess they're off, but looks like they're going to be
yeah.
back on possibly maybe in the near future here. Want to bring some attention here to a bill that was actually introduced earlier this year, but it's getting some new attention now as lawmakers consider it in the House. This is a bill that OOIDA is opposing. It's called the Modern Worker Empowerment Act. And the idea is to amend the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 to clarify the standard for determining whether a worker is an employee or an independent contractor. Familiar stuff we've seen in recent years, of course, and talked a lot about this. But there is a provision in this bill related to so-called safety standards that Louie and I talked a little bit about last week on the show. We didn't get into great detail on it, though. But the concern that OOIDA has is that this provision would open the door for motor carriers to require leased-on owner-operators to use so-called safety technologies. We're talking things like inward-facing cameras, speed limiters, blinker use monitoring, mandatory monthly remedial training. The list goes on and on of, the kind of the slippery slope that this would open the door for motor carriers to impose on leased-on owner-operators. So some alarm bells going off there. OOIDA obviously is keeping their eye on this bill to make sure it doesn't gain too much traction and that lawmakers understand what this means. Safety standards, and I put that in quotes, sounds good on paper, but when you talk about all these other things that they could, in theory, put in place on leased-on owner-operators, again, it raises all sorts of concerns about taking that control away from those folks. So we'll continue to monitor that. It does have, I think, I checked about 15 co-sponsors right now, so not a whole lot of traction, but this is one of these things that keeps popping up in Congress. So if you want to get on the horn or next time you talk to your lawmaker, if you're so inclined,
Mention that, yeah.
definitely bring this one up. The Modern Worker Empowerment Act is the name of the bill, and one that should raise some concerns for folks out there.
For sure. Aurora recently announced it's ramping up operations with a new terminal in Phoenix and the addition of nighttime operations for its driverless trucks. If I do recall, weren't driverless trucks there was weather, like inclement weather they couldn't drive in?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought nighttime was also one. However, they're working to be able to do that. The company's second quarter business review said they detailed the increased driverless nighttime operations between Dallas and Houston. It claims it can detect objects in the dark more than 450 meters away, pedestrians, vehicles, and debris 11 seconds sooner than a traditional driver. So
Consider me pessimistic.
Yeah.
I don't know what the word is there.
And
cynical, but
one thing the company is doing is also live streaming on YouTube. Have you watched
yes,
this?
I have watched it actually. Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It is interesting. I watched it. I only watched it for a little bit here and there, but it is interesting to see. I haven't seen anything crazy yet.
No, I do. Yeah, I mean, there's got to be a little bit of a delay, right?
There is a delay, and I'm going to assume that if something bad happens,
There
they're
would be
probably
a
pulling
huge
that
delay.
stream. But
Yeah.
who knows? I don't know. But yeah, it's moving so quickly. This whole
Yeah.
autonomous vehicle, autonomous truck situation. We should also mention Congress is looking at this issue, and I think that's raising some concerns as well. Because we had just a week or so ago, Congressman Vince Fong of California introducing the America Drives Act is the name of it. This would preempt state laws pertaining to autonomous commercial vehicles while supporting the deployment of regulation of autonomous vehicles in interstate commerce. So in short, states would not be allowed to prohibit the operation of CMVs with level 4 or level 5 automated driving systems. This basically removes the guardrails that we have talked about with people like Missy Cummings before. OIDA, again, has concerns about this, to say the least, as well. Advocating in response to this bill instead for mandatory testing and safety and crash reporting requirements from these commercial truck companies, commercial vehicle companies, to have some accountability, basically open it up so we know what's going on out there. But again, when you look at the entire and how it's moving so quickly,
So fast,
and it's a little scary. At least I think it is. But
for sure.
Yeah.
Tesla has to pay $243 million to victims of a crash that happened in Florida back in
That's a
2019.
nuclear verdict right
That is a
there.
nuclear
Yeah.
verdict. That is a lot of money because of faulty technology of its autopilot mode. So, a federal jury found the company guilty despite the driver admitting that he was distracted by his cell phone before the accident occurred. He was in that autopilot mode. The jury found that Tesla was partly to blame when the driver went through an intersection, struck a young couple, killing the 22-year-old rather woman and injuring the young man. Tesla said, of course, it will appeal. So definitely not
Yeah.
the end that we'll hear of that story, but that is.
Well, and it's just a start too of situations like this.
Mhm.
We've talked about this before with other people. It's just going to take one of these
Yeah,
autonomous trucks in a horribly tragic situation like
like
this
this one.
one.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just going to there's so many unknowns as to where this is
Mm,
going, and it's just uncharted territory.
yeah,
But this is a prime example of what can go wrong when you don't have a human,
exactly.
manning the controls there. One quick thing here, North Dakota. If you have the need for speed, I guess
Hmm.
maybe this is a place to go. They just over the weekend increased the speed limit on interstates there in the state from 75 to 80 miles per hour. Crews are updating 300 signs throughout the state, give or take. Be careful, though. Troopers are apparently told to give drivers only 2 miles per hour over the speed limit of leeway
Mm.
instead of like the
You
normal
can't go
5. So,
85.
yeah, don't go 85.
All right.
82, I guess, is
Noted.
okay, but not 85.
Good to know.
We are speeding into a break here, Ashley. But
Hmm.
coming up, we've got Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine talking truck stop infrastructure. That's up next. Hang tight. Welcome back to Trucking with OIDA. Ashley, we already know about the truck parking shortage. Of course, it's well documented. But there's a new research paper out of MIT that also pinpoints a lack of truck stops nationwide, which it tabs as a serious issue. It is called Truck Stops as Critical Infrastructure, Enhancing Resilience and Driver Safety in Times of Crisis.
Yeah, it came to the conclusion that truck stops aren't just a convenience. The paper said they are critical infrastructure, and since there aren't enough truck stops, that it's negatively impacting truck drivers during normal times and emergencies.
Yeah, something we knew, but good to see research on this
Hmm.
topic,
For
especially
sure.
from those who aren't necessarily involved in the industry specifically. Landline Magazine's Tyson Fisher did speak with the two authors of this study. Let's jump right into that conversation.
The trucking industry has seen all types of truck parking studies over the past few decades, but a new research paper takes a different approach to the issue, pretty much arguing that truck stops should be considered critical infrastructure, especially during emergencies and disasters. So with me to talk about their research are Christina Cafero and Ginny Shan. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So before we dive into this, both of you tell me a little bit about yourselves and kind of how you got here. And by here, I mean researching truck parking and critical infrastructure.
Yeah, so Ginny and I were both students at MIT. We are studying for our master's in supply chain, and one of the requirements is a research component. And Ginny and I were both drawn to the humanitarian aspect of this work. A lot of the projects were really centered around more high tech or supply chain issues or planning. But Ginny and I were really drawn, I think, to the logistics side of this and really getting to understand, all right, who are the people in the truck? Because we study the freight, we study cargo really, really well. But we noticed that there was a real gap for studying the amenities and providing for the needs of drivers. Ginny, do you want to add anything onto that as well?
Yeah, and so Christina and I, we were paired together to work on this project, and we had the great opportunity to dive into, I think, an unseen aspect of the trucking industry because we spend lots of time talking about the road networks, we talk about the people. There's even a fair amount of work that's been done to look at truck stops kind of just as a place for people to seek refuge and to get the essentials, but we've never been able to combine these views and thought about it in the context of what happens when things all, fall apart. So when we're in like a COVID-19 or there's a natural disaster that's hit, I think this is a pretty unique aspect of this aspect of supply chain. And so our purpose of working on this topic was to try and bring some innovation through different methodologies and shed light on an issue that we think doesn't get enough attention.
Great. Yeah, I think when the general public, when they think about a truck stop, they probably just think about a glorified big gas station. You know what I mean? And in my main audience, which is the truck driver, they obviously they understand pretty much what your research has dug into, which we're about to get into. But how would you explain, like, to the average person, or maybe even a policymaker for that matter, that doesn't have the extensive knowledge of the complexities of the supply chain, exactly why is it that we should consider these truck stops to be critical infrastructure?
Yeah, so I think let's first kind of look at, the definition of critical infrastructure, or at least what comes to mind. And for me, before this project, I would have said, it's hospitals, of course, it's utility companies, emergency services. But the missing piece of that conversation, we realized through our research, is truck stops. Truck drivers move about 74% of our national freight, and this is what keeps our grocery stores stocked. It's what keeps our hospital supplies. And when you're especially in a natural disaster, when the need for that cannot be greater, it really turns those truck stops from just, commercial conveniences, best case scenario, really into, I would say, a critical node in our supply chains where they can make the difference on if a community can get the groceries they need and the medicines they need in either tomorrow or in a couple of days. And that can really impact how the community bounces back.
Sure. I mean, I guess one way to look at it is truck stops during those times with emergencies and disasters. We can kind of look at them as distribution centers by which these truckers who provide these relief kind of, provide the supplies that are needed there. But one thing that your study found, and I found this kind of interesting, especially the way you two phrased it, are truck stop deserts, how you have discovered truck stop deserts throughout the nation. So, to dive into that, what is a truck stop desert and how did you find where these are located at?
Yeah, so for what we can kind of consider is a truck stop desert, we wanted to actually be a little bit more specific of, okay, where is there a need also for truck stops? So first thing that we did was we looked at FEMA's National Risk Index, which incorporates each county in the United States is their risk of, natural disaster. And then it also looks at that community's ability to bounce back if they have a high aging population or high population under the age of 10 years old, that they would really need to outsource support. So we looked from that view, and then from there we looked at the nation's 3 top truck stop companies. So that would be Love's, Pilot Flying J, Travel Centers of America, for example. And we looked where are their locations at, and we found that there are, of the 144 high-risk counties, we found that about 44 of those counties did not have a truck stop from the leading 3. So that's about 29%. And I think also what was surprising too is that, they weren't in remote areas. We found that the New York, tri-state area contains several counties that were considered, truck stop deserts, several counties in Florida, even the county that Austin, Texas is in.
And then, let's talk about those truck stop deserts real quick. So, I think the problem is that these truck stop deserts, as you kind of alluded to, these aren't just a truck driver problem, which oftentimes, truck stops, that's kind of how they're phrased. Like, these are for truckers, these are for truck drivers. But you kind of throw out there that perhaps this is a problem that's going to affect the immediate, maybe even the regional communities around there. So can you kind of explain to me the vital role that the truck stops play in the what you call supply chain resilience, especially during these crises?
Yeah, of course. I'll add a little bit to what Christina just said, because I think we get questions sometimes around why we use, let's say, the big 3 chains. And, you might go to one of these counties yourself, or you live in one and say, hey, there's a truck stop right there. We use the 3 of them because they were the best proxy that we had for truck parking. So there isn't one single national database that says, there's parking here, there's parking there, but the vast majority of commercial truck parking is provided by the big three, which is why we kind of use them as a proxy. So there might be, say, like smaller mom and pop style truck stops. It's not to say that they're completely without it, but it's sort of deserted enough that it would be challenging for someone to find a stop, let's say, if they're maybe not planning to stop or maybe they're stuck in an area. Now, to go back to your question, it kind of has to do with what a truck driver's day looks like. So there's something called hours of service, which if you have, truck drivers will be very familiar with it. Essentially, it's a set of rules or federal regulations that dictates how long you can drive as a truck driver and when you have to take a break. Now, once these rules were enforced, it made it challenging for people to say if they wanted to drive a little longer before hours of service, they'd have the flexibility to decide their own schedules. But hours of service are intended to protect drivers, but in some ways they make it really challenging because now you're not really working at your own time, because if you can't find parking, you can't really drive an extra hour or two to find another spot. You are sort of constrained by planning out what your route is going to look like ahead of time. Right. So if I'm a driver, I know I have to stop in 4 hours. I'm going to pick the best stop for me in 4 hours time. Now, in the time of, let's say, like a hurricane, or maybe there's an earthquake, or there's something that takes out like a key utility or something that makes the condition unpredictable, that's really when all of this planning goes out the window. Because what could happen is if a power line goes down, maybe that truck stop you intended to go to no longer has power. And if they're pumping water, they can't access a shower, they can't use a bathroom, they probably can't get food either. If the road has been evacuated or there's a blockage, like a tree's fallen over, you can't get to the truck stop you were supposed to get to. And so the reason it's important to study this is because we can't control when natural disasters happen. And we see that over the next couple of years, we're expected to have more and more. And so what's going to happen is truck drivers are going to suffer the collateral damage where they can't find a place to stop. And what usually happens, at least anecdotally from what we heard in our interviews, is that drivers may have to park illegally, right? It's usually not because they're trying to break rules, but they don't have any other choice. And if they don't rest, they can't continue to work and deliver the supplies that are needed.
Sure. And I also like to point out that the ELD mandate has certainly exacerbated the problems that come with the hours of service issues that you've already pointed out there. So, I mean, a host of problems that we see here, especially with the truck drivers. And I can see how, I do like how you point out, though, that when it comes to things like hurricanes, I saw this in North Carolina, the other year, which is with the flooding. So, and it blocked out huge portions of the interstate over there, which did not make access to these truck stops available, or even those that were available, they had some problems there. So obviously we have problems when it comes to truck drivers providing emergency relief, which I know was a huge focus of your research there. But you also said that you interviewed a lot of trucking stakeholders, but you also did an analysis of some of the truck stop reviews. What did you find in the analysis? What are truck drivers saying in those reviews?
Yeah, so this, I think, is one of the more novel parts of our work, where we've seen studies where sometimes truck drivers are spoken to through like focus groups, or they maybe convenience sample the people that are within the proximity of the researchers. But we thought we wanted to get a perspective of as many drivers as we could. It's not humanly possible to speak to every truck driver in America. We would love to, but we said, let's take the next best thing, right? Like, what if we took like Google Maps reviews? And so that's kind of where we started, but it was really challenging to ascertain, like in one truck stop, who left this review? Like, was it a person or was it a truck driver? And so we were very fortunate to partner with a trucking software company that provided us access to a database of reviews that were left by truckers, because the truck software is only used by truck drivers, or it's majority used by truck drivers. And so we kind of took that as a proxy of these are what the truck drivers need, and they're leaving comments on these truck stops. And so we ran a couple models, and basically what it did was look at groups of 3 in words that showed up together a lot. So you might see the word good parking lot, or you might see like many parking spots and things like that. And so we wanted to try to get a sense of this database of reviews. Let's segment them by different time, by location, because we knew which truck stop the review was left for, and we knew what time it was left at. And let's try to see if there's any pattern that occurs over different time periods, right? And so we used 2 case studies as our example. We looked at COVID-19, so before and after COVID. We looked at Hurricane Ian, before and after, and we wanted to see, what do drivers care about? And so I'd say the findings themselves probably are not very groundbreaking, but it did confirm for us that the needs don't really change. So it's always about parking, food, and restrooms, right? These is the key services. But we found that the parking discussion was the most informative because drivers had expressed wanting large and abundant and free parking options over smaller, more expensive and restricted paid lots. And that's really what drove a lot of the positive reviews of a truck stop. In terms of food, we had drivers express having the desire for like food optionality, the availability of hot food. And then with restrooms, it's, having clean restrooms and good showering facilities. So I don't think the findings were necessarily, that special. I'm sure any driver could tell you those are the things they care about. But the importance was to see, do these needs change across different regions, in different types of emergencies, and in different time periods. And for us, it basically didn't change. So these things, I think, stay the same no matter what condition you're in.
Yeah, and Tyson, even kind of going back to your question about, what is a parking desert? Like, I think at first we looked at it kind of as a binary kind of decision, is like, okay, is there a truck stop in this county? Yes or no. But then as we got more into the reviews, we were able to see that whenever an area lacks parking, even if, a truck stop does exist, but if there's only 50 spots for the entire county, and those spots all fill up by 3 p.m., that creates a parking desert over time. Again and again, we heard that drivers had to cut their days short just because they didn't want to risk continuing driving and not having a safe place to park.
So we've established the problem there. When we come back, the researchers tell us about what solutions might look like, so stick around. Welcome back. When we left you, we were talking with MIT researchers Christina Cafaro and Jenny Shang about their study into the importance of truck stops to the country, but there just aren't enough of them, especially with regard to parking.
Now let's get into what we do to solve the problem, something that researchers looked into as well. Tyson Fisher of Landline magazine picks it back up there.
So yeah, we've established that there's a major issue with parking, and especially in areas where could be prone to disasters. And when that happens, you're going to have downstream effects to the community in the region there. So now that we got that established, I think the question from there is, what do we do? And you laid out some options here on how to move forward with these. And I think the obvious one, would be more truck parking. I think that's something that everyone agrees with. But you also called for, and this is what I found interesting, because when we, in this suggestion, so it's establishing federal resilience standards. And I want to talk about that because when we talk about truck parking studies, which there are many of them, it usually comes from the, this 30,000 foot view approach is we need, physical spots for these, 53 foot, machines, so on and so forth, to park these machines, forgetting that there's a human being on board that has to be dealt with, and not just dealt with, but to, supply just basic human, necessities. And you kind of take that stance and you address that by calling for the establishment of, again, what you call federal resilience standards for truck stop amenities. And so can you explain to me what exactly that means and how that can be possibly implemented?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when we think of a truck driver's workplace, his most common workplace is his truck cab. But if you extend that range, you could think of a truck stop as their workplace too. And if we're looking at people's workplaces, we would want to have standards to make sure everyone's health and safety is being protected. And so that's kind of where this came from, was this idea of how their workplace is maybe not as obvious to the average person. And so we think that federal resiliency standards could mean something like baseline expectations of restrooms, showers, food options and safety features that would allow drivers to keep working regardless of where they are. I don't think that there's any expectation of a truck stop to have necessarily all of those things, but it would be beneficial for them to have them because, of course, it's for them to run their business. But we're saying that it should be considered almost a requirement, especially if you are a truck stop in like a high risk zone or maybe a place that's vulnerable to natural disaster. Another thing we talked about was having some kind of a designation given to truck stops that maybe meet minimum emergency standards. So let's say locations that are prone to suffering power outages, maybe they have generators available or they have additional communication capabilities that make it so when the nearest tower goes down and you're not able to reach anybody on your cell phone, you can count on this truck stop to be open. You can count on them to have power, and it gives them a safe place for them to stop. Because the alternative is if a driver doesn't have a safe place to go, they're camping out in their truck, right? And so we think that there's definitely a need for some targeted infrastructure investments, but also just maybe more of a cohesive effort to say truck stops are really important, but it's not just about ensuring they have the places to stop. It's to make sure that when they're there, they're also treated like people and given the essentials that we would afford to anybody else working through a natural disaster.
And another thing that you recommended, and I'm really happy to hear actual researchers, highlight this and point it out, which is you call for equitable access to parking, which you pretty much define as free or low-cost parking. And on top of that, regulations targeting predator towing. Can you talk about like how you arrived at those conclusions, especially when it comes to predatory towing? Because I don't think that's something that's talked about enough when we are having the discussions about truck stops and then truck parking.
Yeah, so through our interviews, I would say two themes kind of bubble to the surface. First being surge pricing, so parking pricing becoming more expensive in areas that are affected by wildfires and hurricanes. A lot of private owner operators, they absorb those parking costs, and so they're already putting themselves on the line, taking a risk to provide cargo to an area in need, and then on top of that, they have to be pay more money to take that risk. It didn't quite seem to make sense since they're doing a service. And then the second one was the predatory towing. And that's what we heard from several drivers where they couldn't find truck parking. Obviously, they want to park in a parking lot. They want to be safe. But sometimes they're forced to park in an open lot behind a store. And we've heard several examples of even if they had the American Red Cross sticker on the side of the truck, when they would go out to get food, come back, their truck would be booted. And again, this is where they're in a situation, they're doing this more of the goodness of their hearts and really trying to serve the community or serve their state. And that's why they're there. Why else would you drive your truck into the eye of a hurricane? So they're already kind of operating in uncertain conditions, doing the best they can. And then for someone to take advantage of them like that, I really would encourage that we set up laws that prevent that kind of thing whenever an area, especially a state, is considered under emergency by the governor.
The last thing I want to talk about is a quote directly from your research, because it really brings the human element to truck parking. Again, we're not just talking about numbers and data points on a map and stuff like that. We are, but we're also talking about the human element. And that quote is, "A broader cultural shift is needed to reframe the trucking workplace as a shared responsibility." Can you kind of expand on that, on what you mean by that, and again how you got there? I think it's a brilliant line. I love it so much.
So a prevalent theme we heard is whenever a logistical issue happens or truck parking is not available, it all falls on the shoulder of the driver. And driving a truck is hard enough as it is. And it feels like whenever anything goes wrong, the finger gets pointed at them. And it really just begged the question of, okay, is it, whose job is it to look after them? Who has their back when they have our back. So is it the broker? Is it the carrier? Is it who they're going to? Is it the truck stop? But where we see time and time again is where they're being let down is truck stops when there's, a lack of information. Like we heard during COVID, drivers would come to a truck stop just looking for, place to grab a bite, and they find out there, and then when they pull the door that it's closed. So that is really where we started to develop that question.
Thanks to Tyson Fisher for leading that conversation on a very important topic.
Yeah, and as we were kind of saying before, it's great to see these studies from researchers who don't necessarily have a trucking background, because they come to eventually the same conclusion that most of us who are in trucking already know, but it, again, reinforces what the problems are out there. And an outside perspective, I think, can sometimes help when it comes to developing new solutions to these old problems.
Yeah. So on that note, let's take a quick break. Trucking with OOIDA is back after this.
Thanks to all the hardworking drivers across the U.S. from the Allen Lund Company.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
High heat and low lubricity can break your diesel fuel down fast. Summer driving means crowded roads, more stress, dust, and a bigger risk of costly engine damage. Howe's Diesel Defender protects from the inside out, cleaning, lubricating, and fighting injector wear. Visit Howe'sProducts.com.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
At Truck Stop, we built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Welcome back to Trucking with OOIDA. Numbers can sometimes be boring to talk about, but we've found the man who makes them interesting, Mr. Brent Hutto from TruckStop.com.
Yes.
Brent, how's it going?
Ashley, Scott, it is going super great, man. Hey, well, thank you for the kind compliment.
You're welcome.
I'll never forget the first show I was at, and one of the first shows when I got into the actual freight part of this industry back in 2013. I went to, and I heard this economist on stage, and I met him afterwards, and I just said, hey, I had to come meet you. I said, you're the first economist I've ever listened to that wasn't boring. So you gotta.
What did he say?
He looked at me real funny. Huh?
What did he say? Yeah.
Oh no, he just made it fun. He applied it to, like how that's just applied to freight, how this applied to different size companies, and he covered unique things in the marketplace and things that you wouldn't always pay attention to. So to me, that's kind of, if I'm running an operation, I can, I kind of look, I know what the obvious things are. What are some of the things that I wouldn't normally look for that are going to end up, affecting my business when I'm trying to run my truck operation? Because, when you know what's coming at you, you can respond to it a whole lot better than when it hits you from behind, because nobody likes, to be caught off guard. And so that's really, I really thought that was a unique way of putting it.
How did he respond to you when you said that?
Oh my gosh, we're still great friends.
Oh, no.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Oh no, super well. No,
that's good.
And no, he's a great guy. He's now somewhat retired in the marketplace and doing investments and stuff, but really, really sharp guy. And I draw a lot of kind of how I present to this market from him. He's been a great influence on me.
Now, you're usually always jet setting somewhere. Where are you at right now?
Jet-setting Brent.
Jet-setting Brent.
Well, I am. Well, fortunately, I am resting and getting some recovery at home.
Much needed,
in my home office this next couple of weeks. Yeah, it has been super busy with building technology and doing those things and traveling around and understanding. I'm the type of person, I believe in this, Ashley, Scott, I believe in this. I believe that you learn the most when you put your feet where you want them to be, where you want to learn. In other words, you got to go out and go do it. One thing I love about trucking, it's always going up and down the highway. So last week I was in two different places. I was in Chicago talking to a company that does cross-border freight on helping them understand how to build their technology and address the marketplace. And obviously, with a lot of experience with Truck Stop and the owner-operators and the brokers that work in that segment, so I was helping them. And then I got to go to a bucket list place. I mean, it was fantastic. I can't believe after 29 years in this marketplace, I've never been here. I went down to Texas. Bigger and better in Texas, right?
So you had never been to Texas before?
No, it's not Texas. I went down to Texas.
I was going to say.
Yeah, I was like, wait, what?
I've been to Texas. I've never been to the Texas Transportation Association annual show. And it was in Austin.
Okay.
And it was so great. I mean, when they say it's bigger and better in Texas, they mean it. I mean, I've never seen so many cowboy hats. I didn't think there were that many cowboy hats in trucking, but it was fantastic. John Esparza, who's the CEO of the Texas Transportation Association, just put on a fantastic event. And to me, here's what it did for me. I love being around companies that love this market, love helping each other, and really make trucking look good. And to me, the Texas Trucking Association is one of those associations. I've known about them forever. I've known the leader for a long time. I've just never been to the event. And it just was a fantastic thing. They were raising money to help people, improve and further their careers in transportation. They were doing all kinds of things about what's the market update, what's going on in the industry. So, but, and then just really supporting each other. How can they help each other, increase their businesses? And we're talking about one of the largest marketplaces in all of transportation. And certainly, I think for a while, it was number one for freight transportation in the United States. And so it was just fantastic to be down there and be around the fleets that represent the great Republic of Texas. They don't call it the state of Texas. They call it the Republic of Texas.
That's a cool city, too, Austin. Right?
Oh,
that's where it was, right?
If you like bats, you'll love Austin.
Yeah.
I mean, I did not know that. If you want to see 1 million bats every single day come from underneath a bridge and scare you to death,
and they fly right over you, right?
Oh my God!
Yeah.
I had no idea this happened. I was on a little Lime scooter a couple of years ago when I was down for one of the other shows down there. And I'm like touring around, like, what are all those people doing on the bridge? And like, all this big crowd and everything. And there's a whole lot. And I look, and all of a sudden there's this giant black cloud coming out from this bridge, and I'm going, what the? Those are bats.
Yeah.
1 million. It's the largest ground for bats in the United States, in Austin, Texas, underneath this bridge that goes over the whatever river that goes through there.
Ashley just had the opposite reaction.
You guys are
what
not selling this to me.
It sounds cool to me.
Not on my bucket list.
They got little bat things all over the city.
Yeah.
The bike racks are bats. Everything's bats.
So
they love it.
They've embraced
it.
it.
They say, hey, Ash, they say you got to keep it weird in Austin, and I think that's part of it.
Yeah,
I think
that sounds weird.
Cool.
For sure.
For sure.
Let's spread our wings, and I was trying to. I was trying to come up.
Segue.
I was trying. I'm always trying. I'm not sure that one hit, but let's spread our wings and talk about. Let's talk about what's going on out there. We've talked about it before, Brent, time and time again.
Yeah.
It's challenging out there. We're in the dog days of summer right now, when things typically kind of, slow down a little bit.
They do.
Give us a thumbnail sketch of what's going on out there. I think you're going to tell us it's still a challenging, market for everybody. But what are you seeing out there in terms of rates, volume, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, let's level set first. Thank you for kind of setting it up that way, Scott. First off, it is hard for transportation out there. In the last 24, 26 months, the transportation costs to move freight, not pricing that you get paid to move it, but the actual cost, your insurance cost, your labor cost, your fuel cost, all the things that go into transportation, they've increased by about 25%. And now if you're a really big fleet in the marketplace, this is hitting you very hard. This is pretty much all of your profit. I'll talk a little bit about that in the very end of this when we talk about sort of the conditions, some of the other fleets in the marketplace. But if you're a small player, if you're like a 1 truck or 2 truck or a 5 truck or a 10 truck operation, you can change your operational ratios. And what I mean by that is you can change your operational cost really quickly.
Yeah.
And you can adjust to it. And nobody can change it better than the American owner-operator, where they can change their cost almost automatically, especially how in which they run their operation. And I say that because most owner-operators, they really just look, Scott and Ashley, they really just look at the rate and they go, oh, gosh, rates aren't high enough. Well, they could be better, but rates last week were $2.31. The week before that, they were $2.31. Well, last time I checked, before the pandemic, all truckers are like, I got to get $2 a mile. But you're getting $2 a mile. You're getting $2.31, and that's before negotiation. That's the posted rate.
Yeah.
So you're getting that. Now, if you're in the van marketplace, it was $1.94. Flatbed was $2.37. Refrigerator was $2.38, and that's the posted rate. And that's not the negotiated rate. You better be getting more than that. But you better be a good enough trucker and have good enough relationships to get more than that when you're negotiating. And if you are, you will. But my point to this is that that nobody can adjust to the market conditions better than an owner-operator. So now is not a bad time to be in the market at all. So the pressure in the marketplace, let me go back to this. The pressure in the marketplace was about 87 last week. The previous week with that was about 78. Well, what does that mean? Okay, Brent, what's that mean? That's just a number. Okay, well, what I mean is the amount of freight available as divided by the number of trucks that say they're empty and ready to haul freight. Now, that's not a perfect measurement, but it is a number that's been being used for over 20 years. It's called the Market Demand Index. Well, the normal of that as post-pandemic normal is about 55. Well, it hasn't been 55 since I think before the pandemic started.
Yeah.
Because it's just the pressure has been above, and then what that tells you is there's more freight in the United States to be moved. And I've got some great data on this as well that talked about the freight in the past 25 years hasn't gone backwards at all from the standpoint of where we are in the marketplace. It continues to expand and get more. So when that happens, there's more freight to be hauled by all trucks. All right, so let me cover the last thing that gives me probably the most hope. There's a figure out there that's called the Outbound Tender Reject Index. It's put out by Sonar, really good data platform, and it's the only measurement in the marketplace that measures the freight that's being rejected by these big, medium-sized and large fleets that are out there. These contract freight haulers, and what it does is how much of the freight's been rejected or renegotiated of this contract freight that was agreed to move that by a certain price many, many months ago. Well, if it's at 5%, that's sort of the watermark on, are we getting more freight in this marketplace? Are we getting less freight in this marketplace? And so, and this is a good thing, because for the last 43 straight weeks, so for almost a year, it has been above 5%. And Scott, you mentioned the marketplace where we are right now. Well, we're post July 4th, where we're a month past post July 4th. So the marketplace, what it does is it starts getting bigger in March. It builds up all the way to July 4th, and then it comes down for a little while, all the way until the middle of August, almost the end of August, into September, where we get into holiday freight movements.
Right.
And so then it starts building back up, and rates go up, should grow up. But here's the good thing about the Outbound Tender Reject Index. It's been above 5% for almost a year. Now, this is the good thing. This is the thing that puts a smile on Brent's face. So if you look what the rejection rate, thanks, Ashley. If you look at the rate, what it was last year at this time, it was 4.54. So 4.54% of that freight was being rejected. What is it this year? 5.63. You go, oh, well, Brent, that's just 1.09 points. That's not that big a deal. Don't look at that. Look at the percentage difference. This year is almost 20% higher than last year. That is remarkable, because that means we're going to get more freight in the spot market, because some of that contract freight doesn't go back to contract hauler. It goes into the spot market because the shipper goes, I think I'm going to try somebody else. And so this. Now, let me just put it this way. It's 5.63 today. In the middle of the pandemic, it was 28%. So you can see why we had such a crazy big market. That's kind of where we are. Some of the rates and lanes in the marketplace are. Let me get to the piece of data right here. Okay, here we are. So we've been looking at Texas. Texas still is very strong, but there's other parts of the market that continue to come up. Texas still remains strong for van, flatbed, and refrigerated, but there's good markets like Portland to Phoenix for van, Miami, believe it or not, an interstate move, or Denver to Houston, that's back to Texas. And then on the refrigerated end, you've got Oklahoma to Dallas, you got Memphis to Memphis, some interstate. Here's the big thing. The big thing is, why do we see all this doubt? Why do we see all this Texas stuff? Well, it's because so much manufacturing is being done in Mexico and coming across the border. This is why I was talking to that cross-border group earlier last week. So you're just seeing more and more freight coming out of places that are closer to the United States than further than, say, out of a port, which might be coming from across the ocean in one of the other countries. So kind of things are following a normal pattern that's really good for trucks out there.
Yeah, which hopefully will lead us back into normal territory. And again, what is normal?
Yeah, for sure.
I guess that's subject to whatever you think is normal. Not you, but people in general. One thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I'm going to preface this by saying, Brent, we've only got about 3 minutes left, so just keep that in mind here. But
I'm ready.
The Trump administration, we've seen a lot of these things, all the tariff talk and the uncertainty surrounding that. There's one aspect of it that I know you kind of caught your eye as being an opportunity for the freight market here and kind of maybe injecting some new life into it. The de minimis provision. I'm not sure what the term is there that we should be using, but talk a little bit about that for us.
Yeah, well, it's not just Latin's a dead language, and you'll see de minimis, and you're like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
So de minimis was was basically a agreement between importers that a way in which they could forego not paying the tariff on goods moved in the United States.
Right.
So if it was $800 and less in physical value, U.S. dollar value, you could ship it from anywhere outside of the United States. And I mean any country. It wasn't like some countries got special privileges. Anywhere, and avoid 100% of the tariff. Now, what did this do during the pandemic? This is where you get like Temu and Shin and all these companies that are doing like super small shipments in the United States. Well, they went from less than 1 million in 1 year for the de minimis to when we moved the tariffs up to over 5 million shipments of $800 or less shipments coming in the United States. And so President Trump said enough of this. He was going to he's been talking about de minimis for a while, and you thought he was going to do something maybe in September or October. He said, absolutely not. We're ending it immediately on August 29th because so many of these packages were avoiding the tariffs, but it was also taking freight kind of because these are smaller shipments, and most of them are kind of on the parcel-ish end.
Right.
So basically, he's revoking this to continue to build the strength back into the American trucking market. Certainly for tariffs, that's a revenue issue from a standpoint of the country. Actually, it's a balance of dollars moving back and forth, and that's another story for another day. But this de minimis thing is really, really good for trucking because eventually what it does, it builds more freight back into the full truckload marketplace because instead of them being able to come in these little small packages, they're going to have to come in under standard containers, which plenty of those get moved into the standard full trucking marketplace. So this de minimis revoke is just another example of how our current president is really pro-trucking. And that's a really great thing for everyone that owns and operates a truck out there.
And August 28th is when that goes into effect. How long, and real brief, quick answer here if you could, Brent, but how long before we start seeing the effects of that, do you think?
Oh, I don't think we'll see the effects of it until probably first quarter of 2026.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be my guess. It takes about a quarter for things to get kind of balanced back out under manufacturing and things like that, because you're talking about people that have manufactured things that were sort of smaller pieces. This is where you kind of order something off Instagram and you get it like 2 months later.
Yeah.
And you order a T-shirt and it takes 2 months to get it.
Yeah.
So it'll just get packaged a different way because they're not going to stop doing business.
Right. Yeah. I just ordered some googly eyes from my daughter who likes to do crocheting, and it's exactly this situation where your package will be delivered sometime between September 1st of 2025 and November 18th of 2026. And I said, oh, boy.
I know.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
But
I tell you, it's a good marketplace out there. I mean, the marketplace continues to get stronger for trucking.
Yeah. Brent, you talked about that economist that brings the numbers to life.
Yeah.
I think we can safely say that applies to you as
Definitely.
well.
Oh, thanks.
So you can pass that on to that your friend and say that you've taken the baton and run with it. So Brent Hutto, truckstop.com. We appreciate your time as always. Always good talking to you, and safe travels wherever you're headed next.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for everything that OOIDA does to help our market be great. Appreciate you guys.
And we appreciate you listening to Trucking with OOIDA. We'll see you again next time. Today's episode of Trucking with OOIDA was brought to you by a dedicated team of people that includes Jim Fetzer, Keegan White, Tennille Flick, and Kim Boren.
Got thoughts? We'd love to hear them. Call us at 1-800-324-6856 and leave us a message. Or you can send us an email to podcast@ooida.com, and we might include it on the show.